All right. So I think we're gonna get started, and then like as people trickle in, obviously I have the lovely Lauren here this morning helping me get everybody sorted in. I just have a few like housekeeping things. So I just wanted to ask everyone to mute their microphone when you come in. I think we're still learning Teams and it's trying to automatically mute you, but I don't know if it's always working. So as you go throughout the presentation, just make sure that you're muted. And then also, if you have any questions, like clarification wise, if I say something that you don't understand or you want me to explain it again, you can type that into the chat and I'm happy to pause during the presentation and try to answer that as best I can. But I'm also going to leave some time at the end for more sort of like big picture questions or examples or whatever other like sort of bigger thoughts that you guys might have. And you can put those in the chat at any time, but just know that I'll try to like answer them towards the end just so I can keep everything flowing for everybody. Um, and then also, like I said in the chat, we're also going to send out a copy of the slides. And then also we're recording this presentation, so we'll make that available to everyone if you want to go back and check it out again. Okay. All right, so I guess we're just going to get started. This is out of the box emotional regulation for autistic students in grades K through 12. All right, so just a little bit about me so you guys can know who I am since I'm going to be talking at you for the next hour or so. I'm the director of occupational therapy here at Monarch Center for Autism. And I did sort of start my OT career a little bit later in life. I loved the idea of the science and creativity and compassion that defines occupational therapy. And then I love, the idea of strengths-based practice and promoting autistic voices. And also the collaboration between different disciplines. You'll see a little bit of that in the later parts of this presentation, especially with our speech and language department. It's super important to me because these students need help from all members of the team, not just one discipline at a time. And a little bit about me personally. Some of my favorite occupations are reading, cooking, and baking for friends and family, spending time with my husband and my pets, which you see here on the screen, and also playing video games. I never leave home without at least two beverages. I always have a water and a coffee with me. And also practicing yoga weekly has become a part of my integral routine that helps me stay regulated. So next, sorry, I'm learning how to move the slides. I do have a couple of disclosures just so that you guys know. I am the director of OT here at Monarch, and I do receive compensation for my work. And non-financial disclosures, I have friends and family who are neurodivergent. So next, I want to go over the learning objectives, which I have listed here. So I want you guys, when we're finished with this presentation, to be able to describe traditional methods of teaching emotions and coping strategies / regulation, and provide evidence as to why they may not always work for autistic individuals and why they are likely not neurodiversity affirming. You should also be able to define key terms like sensory processing, what the 8 senses are, and self-regulation, interoception, alexithymia, strengths-based practice, and affective and homeostatic emotions. And then finally, you should be able to identify and understand how to implement at least 2 alternative strategies for teaching autistic individuals to recognize how they feel and learn how to regulate.
Hey, Abby, I'm not sure we can see the slides that you're talking about in the chat. We're all kind of talking about. We can see you, but not the slides.
Hold on one second. Let me see if I can figure that out. Do you know one? Can you guys see them now?
Sorry, I guess some people in the chat can see them and some can't.
Oh, no. Okay.
So.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Someone is saying maybe it's your setting. I know we're learning Teams. I'm so sorry. We switched from Zoom to Teams this year. What is, hold on one second. Okay, we also think perhaps if you set your view to gallery, you might be able to see it. Maybe try that. When someone else is saying they have to move them themselves. Again, I'm so sorry. We're learning. Mm, Sorry, everybody. Give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna try something different, okay? I'm so sorry, guys. Give us like 2 minutes. I don't want you guys to have to listen to me talk without being able to see the slides, so let me see if I can fix it. I'm so sorry, guys. That was like a little bit of a uh, tech savvy here. Okay, can you guys see it now? Maybe some like chats you
Yeah.
can unmute. Can everybody see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I advance it and you can see it. Hold on. Oh gosh. You can see that it changed.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, incredible. Thank you guys for being so patient with us. We're new to Teams and it's very weird and annoying, so we're gonna make that work. Okay, let me go back and I'm not gonna yap at you about myself again, but I will pull up the learning objectives and we'll just start from here. Thank you all for being so patient. I appreciate it. Okay, so just to recap a little bit on our learning objectives, we want to make sure that you guys can describe traditional methods of teaching emotions and coping strategies, and then also provide some evidence as to why they may not always work for autistic individuals and why they might not be neurodiversity affirming. Um, we also want you to be able to define key terms such as sensory processing, what the 8 senses are, co and self-regulation, interoception, alexithymia, strengths-based practice, and affective and homeostatic emotions. And then I also want you to be able to understand how to implement at least 2 alternative strategies for teaching autistic individuals to recognize how they feel and learn how to regulate. Okay. Next, I just want to go over what sort of like teaching emotions in a traditional method might look like, right? And I'm sure something like this is kind of familiar to all of you, right? We have some flashcards, we have maybe some color-coded emoji faces, we have some real pictures of kids making sort of like exaggerated emotion faces, right? Just a couple more examples, things like using, again, different colors, emojis, maybe some different what can I do actions at the bottom. And I think that there's nothing necessarily wrong with any of these examples, right? These are not incorrect. They're not making false claims, but I think that sometimes they're not what is always best for our particular group of students, right? And so I want to be able to talk to you guys a little bit about what these things might have in common, right? They focus on the outward appearance of the individual, right? They all have, let me see if I can backstep actually. Oh, I can. Look at me go. They all have like a picture or a depiction of what someone's face looks like, right? Um, but but how often are you looking at your own face when you're feeling an emotion? Unless someone is putting a mirror in front of you or unless you're looking at the mirror, you can't really see what your own face looks like, right? They also often involve making assumptions about how someone is feeling based on that outward appearance. So things like you're smiling, you look happy, or you're crying, you must be sad, right? But people smile for lots of different kinds of reasons, not just because they're happy. They also, almost all of them use traditional emotion words, things like sad or happy or surprised. And many autistic individuals have reported that those words don't resonate with them, right? They don't connect any meaning to that language. They also may imply that some emotions are better or more desirable to feel than others. I'm gonna go back one more time. So this bottom right example specifically at the bottom, it always gets me because it says use tools to get into the green zone, right? And so that can often sort of send the message, whether intentionally or not, that the green zone is good and the green zone is where you want to be. And it can feel invalidating with all of those other emotions, right? Um, and they might say something like keep up the good work when you're in the green zone and you only need to use a tool when you're not in the green zone. And like I said, although like with the best of intentions, sometimes the message that comes across is that students should always be happy or calm. And then they also do not consider the unique internal experience of neurodivergent individuals. So many neurodivergent or autistic people are naturally using maybe non-traditional language or different kinds of references to communicate their experience or to how they recognize their experience. And so those words just don't mean anything to them. And then I promise this is not going to be a super research heavy presentation, but I just want to cite a few things that sort of support my message here. The first one is that autistic individuals tend to focus on different areas of faces. So we know that eye contact is a little bit different in autistic individuals, at least based on Western standards, right? And research has confirmed this with various eye tracking technology studies. And then some other research suggests that beyond differences in eye contact, that autistic individuals spend more time looking at other areas of the face, such as the mouth, or even less time sort of like identifying or looking at core features like your eyes, your nose, or your mouth overall. And so that tells us that teaching emotions based on facial expressions, which involve those sort of like main features of the mouth, of the face changing, it's not going to be the most effective for this population. Next, we also know based on research that autistic brains demonstrate decreased activation in the areas of the brain that are responsible for interoception, emotional processing, and social cognition. And this specific study that I cited here asked autistic adults to rate stimuli on their degree of pleasantness or unpleasantness, and then compared their answers to results from these empathy questionnaires. And their results showed a strong correlation between lack of empathy and challenges with interoception, along with decreased activation in the anterior insula, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But that's just like the place where you process emotions, right? And then the third set of studies I want to mention is that autistic individuals often experience impaired interoceptive accuracy, which again, I'm going to talk about interoception specifically in lots of detail in a few minutes. But just in general, these studies show that autistic people are more likely to misinterpret or miss altogether their internal sensations. And they quantified that with heartbeat detection tasks and then self-report of increased sensitivity to those internal sensations, which also incidentally were strong predictors of an anxiety diagnosis. And so I think that if I had a hard time noticing and interpreting what my body was telling me, I might be kind of anxious too. A different study also used a self-report questionnaire to quantify perceptions of body awareness and thirst awareness, with those results indicating that autistic individuals demonstrated clinically significant lower body and thirst awareness compared to the control group. I also, fully believe that evidence-based practice is a little bit of research and a little bit of client experience and a little bit of clinical experience. So I just wanted to also talk about my clinical experience specifically. I was seeing so many students that were stuck. They had rote knowledge of emotion words and they could identify based on flashcards what an emotion would typically look like on someone else. They had a toolbox full of coping tools that probably some adult had chosen for them. Um, they could accurately tell you what they would do in a hypothetical situation. But when push came to shove in those moments of heightened emotions or challenging situations, they just could not identify how they were feeling and access a coping strategy. I was also noticing that, like I said, many staff with good intentions were using those zones, visuals, or emotion options as a tool to get students to change how they were feeling. They weren't really using it as a tool to gather information. They were using it as a way to say, okay, well, you're not here, so I need you to be here. And I think that that sort of inadvertently taught our students that we wanted them to tell us that they were happy. So we would have a lot of students who were, visibly, not participating. Maybe they were crying, maybe they were laying on the ground, doing all these things that told me that like they weren't having a great time. But when you asked, how are you feeling, they would say happy. And I think that that's what they thought that the right answer was. So I just knew based on all of this information that we needed to try something different. And that's sort of where our out of the box strategies come from. Okay, so before I get into like the specific strategies, I think that there's a few pieces of sort of like some definitions and some background that will help you guys sort of like understand those strategies a little bit better. And the first one being strengths-based practice. So this is the philosophy of striking a balance between asking an autistic child or person to learn new skills and then asking for the change to come from elsewhere, such as changing the environment, the teaching style, or the activity itself. Um, we don't necessarily need to ignore or avoid the challenges that our students face, but we also need to make sure that we're not focusing so much on the challenges that we lose sight of their strengths and their interests and their positive self-worth. So strengths-based practice is rooted in the idea of self-determination theory, which includes autonomy, which is being able to freely choose the things in your life and not being controlled. Competence, which is doing things that you initiate and also make you stretch a little bit, and relatedness, which is choosing your relationship with others. And so I think keeping in mind the strengths of your autistic learners will not only help them learn more quickly in an authentic, intrinsically motivated way, but it can also do wonders to help you build a strong relationship between you and your student. Okay, just some other important terms. I want to make sure we all know what I'm talking about here. So sensory processing is a person's ability to receive, manage, and interpret messages from each sensory system. And then sensory integration is your brain's ability to orchestrate all of those sensations into meaningful behavioral and motor responses without becoming too overwhelmed, distracted, or disengaged. And these are like super foundational components of our nervous system, and they're necessary for shaping how we interact with ourselves, our environment, and other people. Next, I'm going to give you guys just like a real quick rundown of those 8 sensory systems because the last one is going to be a big focus of this presentation, but you should still know what all the other ones are. So vestibular input is how we detect movement, understand our relationship to gravity, and regulate our attention level. This system plays a critical role in how a student understands their body and their environment. The sort of like founder of sensory integration theory, Jane Ayers, she said that it's like a GPS system for your body. It connects your brain with your body. That helps with spatial awareness. It guides our motor movements. It tells us to speed up or slow down. And it helps us sort of stay on the road. This is all other types of sensation are processed in reference to this basic vestibular system. Next, I want to talk a little bit about proprioceptive input. And so that's our body awareness that's communicated via our muscles and joints, and it helps us understand where our body is in space and how to move our bodies through our environment. It helps us detect force and vibration. And grading of force is what allows us to adjust the amount of strength we use when lifting, pulling, or pushing something. And a lot of us naturally do this without even thinking about it. I know that I can look at my coffee cup and sort of sense how much force I need to pick it up. And that's why it doesn't go flying across the room, that I don't use too much force, right? Or that if I'm going to go pick up a piece of paper, I use less force to pick it up. And my proprioceptive system is what's telling me that before I've even touched the thing. The cool thing about the proprioceptive system is that it also only has inhibitory neurons, which means that proprioceptive input is always going to be down regulating to your nervous system, unlike all of the other systems which can have both excitatory and inhibitory neurons. Next, I'll talk a little bit about super quick the sensations that you guys are probably more familiar with in terms of the sensory system. So oral input is a combination of what we taste, smell, and feel in our mouths. And then gustatory input, more specifically, is just what you taste. Tactile input is what we feel when we touch something or when something touches us. It gives us an understanding about texture and temperature, as well as information about pain. Um, Visual input is what we see. And our world has a huge amount of visual input that we get throughout the day. Think about the colors and the textures and the patterns on the walls and the chairs and the floors. Every poster that you have on the wall, every sign that's up somewhere, that's all adding to the visual input that our learners are getting every day. Next is auditory input, and that's what we hear. So again, just like visual input, our world is filled with auditory input, from the cars outside, the hum of the air conditioner, or this power slide projector that's going in the room where I'm sitting, different conversations with peers, people talking, you can hear echoes, especially in large spaces. I think that there are oftentimes a lot of sounds going on that our brains have learned, and because our auditory system is working as it should, to tune those things out and to sort of push them to the lower levels of perception. We can hear it, and then our brain says, you don't really need to know that you're hearing that. And that's something that our students who get really overwhelmed by auditory input, their brains aren't doing. So they're hearing on the same awareness level all of those sort of background noises that we've learned to tune out. And then finally is our interoceptive system, and this is our ability to detect our internal needs. This is things like using the bathroom, identifying hunger, or taking a break when you're overheated, or putting on a jacket when you feel cold. Um, okay, next, just wanna talk a little bit about this idea of like sensory, right? So sensory is happening all the time. We are experiencing near constant sensory input from both external and internal sources all of the time. Unconsciously, your brain and body are both reacting to that input, and each of us has a unique brain with unique preferences for sensory experiences. So, sensory input isn't only important to our students, like we as humans are doing this all the time. And I think that it's often helpful to bring awareness to your own sensory preferences to sort of talk about a point of connection between you and your students, and maybe give yourself a little bit of a deeper understanding that can help sort of foster that genuine sense of compassion. So I'm gonna do like a little, you guys can unmute when I get to it, but I just want to hear a little bit from you guys about your own sensory preferences. So like things that you like or things that you don't like, or things that like that don't really make your body feel good, or any sort of points of connection you might have with like your student or your autistic individual in your life. Anybody? You can unmute, it's okay. Or you can put it in the chat if you don't want to talk.
Hi, my name is Melanie Hamid. I teach in the Warren City School District. I'm not a special ed teacher. I'm just a regular ed teacher. But last year, I got two students who were on the spectrum. My one baby I always held my arms open to him, and he would come into them, and then he would rub his face against mine. And I was like, oh, so I called my son who works with autistic children, and he said, oh yeah, mom, that's sensory. He has to, that comforts him. I said, okay. So now the baby has moved on to a higher level, and he still comes downstairs and he still walks into my arms and he still rubs his face, but this time he kind of shakes his face up against mine. So I'm just loving every second of that. So I called the mom and she said, oh yeah, he loves you. I said, I love that kid. But that was something new to me.
Yeah. I think we've all sort of had experiences like that, right? Where we sort of are learning from our students, and maybe that tells us something about ourselves too, right? And thank you so much. Okay. Next I want to talk a little bit about the word regulation. I think I've said it a couple of times, but I always like to make sure that everyone sort of is operating from the same level of understanding and same definition. So regulation is an individual's ability to manage his or her internal emotional and physical state in order to stay calm and engaged. Um, So we need information from all of our sensory systems to work together, which allows us to navigate through our day in a regulated way and perform all the tasks that are required of us. The sum of all of our sensory systems together is greater than their individual parts. Internally, regulation is a neurological process that involves a balance between your two nervous systems. So that's my little graphic here. Um, your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest system, and then your sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. And so together they control all of our internal bodily functions like heart rate, respiration rate, your digestion, even your saliva production, and how dilated your pupils are. That all is controlled by these two nervous systems. Um, and a state of regulation occurs when those two nervous systems are in balance. And this is required in order for us to access those higher level cognitive functions in our brain. If your nervous system is not regulated, your thinking brain is not on. Um, And then emotional regulation is more specifically your ability to control your emotional state, including monitoring and responding to stimuli, stressors, or other wide ranges of emotions. Your capacity for emotional regulation changes based on your foundational nervous system regulation. So if your nervous system is dysregulated, your capacity to manage your emotional regulation is less. Next, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of some perspective, maybe, on self-regulation. So, self-regulation is the ability to manage, monitor, and react through behavior, emotions, thoughts, and energy in a way that is effective for ourselves. Um, and this idea doesn't necessarily mean people-free regulation. Independent self-regulation is more about being able to recognize the need to regulate and then knowing what actions you can take. Sometimes relying on others to help us regulate, such as talking something out with a friend or playing a game with a group of peers, spending time with family, like that's still independent self-regulation. It doesn't mean you have to do it alone. Um, but learning to self-regulate is an important developmental skill that continues to improve across the lifespan. Yes, even into young adulthood. So I have this little graphic here that talks about developmentally how much caregiver co-regulation, which I'll talk about in a minute, versus a youth or a child's self-regulation, like what those ratios are. And as you can see, like it's a lot of help, right, from another person. So I think that we need to consider the developmental stage of our students and sort of like keep this in mind when we're asking them to manage their thoughts and emotions and manage their behaviors. And remember that their brains are still developing and it's totally normal for them to still need our help. Um, and I think that those two, they're sort of like pinkish red circles are those like big areas of growth that you can see on the chart. And so I think that we could consider that sort of like preschool age and then that like middle adolescence age as really big opportunities to sort of capitalize on those areas of those times in brain development and sort of hone in on working in more self-regulation skills at those times. Okay. Next, I want to talk about co-regulation. So, co-regulation is the attuned and responsive interactions between a child and an adult that allows them to reach a state of regulation together. And this is one of my favorite graphics because I think that it sort of depicts the most important part to me of self-regulation or co-regulation, which is that you have to be regulated. So if a student is anxious or upset or frustrated, and you come in also being anxious, upset, or frustrated, and your waves look like their waves, that's not co-regulation. We have to be the calm to help sort of calm down their system, right? This is, like I said, it uses our own state of regulation and coping strategies to sit with a student, joining them in their experience and modeling those strategies. And we need to be able to form safe, trusting relationships in those sensory attuned environments, which can, as in my previous chart, influence the development and growth of this skill within their brain. Um, Specifically, we need to build those supportive, safe relationships, adequate sensory environments that provide the just right amount of input, and also making sure that those environments are predictable to sort of help the student feel more safe. Um, and then I also think, I talked a little bit about it, but it's really, really important to keep our own sensory preferences and how we regulate in mind when we're working with students who need our help regulating. There's probably things that you guys are doing throughout your day that help you focus or stay more regulated that you're not even realizing. Specifically at work, like I think that it's something we've been talking a lot about at Monarch School is that, you need to be able to know when it's time for you to regulate, or when it's time for you to take a little bit of a break to regulate yourself and calm your nervous system down, throughout the day, because working with these kinds of students can be challenging, but we have to be the calm to their storm, right? Personally, I make sure that I can always access some like very basic coping tools that can get me through maybe a tougher day. Things like chewing gum. I always have a fidget with me at all times in my pocket. I keep my water bottle full of cold water. Those are sort of like easy peasy things that you can do really quickly. I also like fully believe in dressing comfortably. I think that if I'm going to be bothered by a tag or how my shirt is fitting or my pants are too tight, that's just going to add to my inability to be able to manage my own emotional state. And it's going to make me less available for my students. Some other really common examples are like twisting your hair, clicking a pen, maybe like picking at your nails or your cuticles, tapping your foot or fidgeting with your legs, like moving my hands. Those are all things that you're doing to sort of like regulate your own body state throughout the day. Next, I do want to talk a little bit about more specifically how to be a good co-regulator. So I know I already talked about, you need to be regulated, but these are sort of more like action items that you can do in relation to your students. So you need to provide that warm, responsive relationship by displaying care and affection, recognizing and responding to cues that signal needs and wants, and providing caring support in times of stress. Um, this sort of shows interest in their world. It shows respect for them as an individual and commitment to caring for them no matter what. So that like unconditional positive regard. Next, structuring the environment to make regulation more manageable. So that's providing a buffer against environmental variables and creating consistent, predictable routines, environments, and expectations. And that means creating the environment that's physically and emotionally safe for them. Consistent, predictable routines and expectations promote a sense of security by showing those clear goals for behavior regulation. And then the final component of this is teaching and coaching self-regulation skills through modeling, instruction, opportunities for practice, prompts to use skills, and then reinforcement of each step along the way. We can't expect our students or our children to do something that we haven't yet taught them how to do. And teaching involves a lot of repetition, a lot of opportunities for practice, and then also like letting them know that they did a good job, even if it wasn't perfect. Things like scaffolding, backwards chaining, those can all sort of like promote practice that can then help them access those skills during times of challenge. Next, I want to give you guys those details about interoceptive awareness. So I know we talked a little bit about the interoceptive system, but I'm going to talk about it again. It's what allows us to experience those internal physiological sensations. So there are receptors all over our body that collect information and send it to a special area in the brain. And then noticing these signals is what helps us answer that question of how do I feel? Right? Interoceptive awareness is the degree to which we're able to actually notice and consciously connect those body signals, right? So a student who can't appropriately identify their emotions might not be able to feel them internally or might be feeling them too intensely. These sensations are usually unconscious. And our interoceptive awareness is like bringing that forward, right? So I have one more question for everybody. You can unmute or you can type it in the chat. How do you know when you're hungry? Anybody? How do you know?
My stomach starts growling.
Yeah, okay. That's a good one. Anybody else? Someone said my head hurts in the chat. Yeah, stomach growling. Okay. Anyone else ever felt like you've thrown up, right? What's the sensation of your stomach growling? Does it kind of feel the same as when you're gonna throw up? Right? Like there's just like sensation happening in the middle part of your body. Like those sensations can often be kind of like similar, right? All right, good. Thank you guys so much. We'll come back to this, I promise. Um, So next, here's just like a pretty simplified graphic. Again, I'm not like a neuroscientist by any means, but just to give you guys some like visual context of what I was talking about with processing these signals in your brain. So this is the pathway that those interoceptive signals take. So at the very beginning, I did mention in the research studies that anterior insula, and that's the area of your brain that's being talked about in this green square here. And so that's the part of your brain that's sending the message about your body sensations back to your consciousness, right? So when research is showing that there's decreased activation in that part of the brain in autistic individuals, that's telling us that that signal is not going to be made as aware to those students when that part of their brain is not firing up as much as it might in a neurotypical brain. Next, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of alexithymia. And so that's an inability or reduced ability to notice and describe emotions. So just like any other sensory system, your interoceptive system can be hyper or hyposensitive. So those body signals can be too big or they can be too small. So those who are hyper aware, where the signal is really big, tend to be like overreactive in their responses, both in positive and negative. So they might experience really like strong, overpowering signals, or they might feel them all at once. So, like if someone feels like they constantly need to go to the bathroom, or they constantly feel that their stomach is empty, those students might have an overreactive interoceptive system. Um, then those who are hypo-aware, they might be less sensitive and less responsive to those cues that their body is giving them. Signals are muted or weak, or they go unnoticed. And so an example of this is someone who is like, I need to use the bathroom right this second, right? They should have noticed that signal maybe a little bit earlier, but they don't get the message until the signal is huge, right? And then there's another category where you can have maybe distorted signals. So that's where the signals are noticeable, but not enough to tell you where or what the problem is. Like you're just feeling crummy, you know that something is wrong, but you can't exactly pinpoint where it's hurting, and you can't communicate that to anybody. So I think alexithymia was previously thought of as like a whole separate construct, but it's recently been tied into challenges with interoceptive awareness. But it usually only considers affective emotions, but we're going to talk about both of these kinds of emotions moving forward. So affective are emotions that involve mood and our reactions to the world all around us. And then homeostatic emotions are the things that drive us to fill our basic bodily needs. So homeostatic is that like hunger, thirst, tired, bathroom needs. And then affective emotions are things like on this emotion wheel, happy, sad, mad, those sorts of things. Okay, so the first different approach, or out of the box approach, I guess, that I want to talk to you guys about is an interoceptive curriculum. And so all of the sort of like examples in this presentation for this use Kelly Mahler's interoceptive curriculum as their base. But as you'll see when I pull up the next few slides, they've all been sort of like heavily modified for students. So the interoception curriculum was developed by Kelly Mahler, who's an OTD, as a step-by-step framework that's supposed to help students develop mindful self-regulation through improving interoceptive awareness. And it's rooted in neuroscience and psychology and occupational therapy research. And then the curriculum itself is organized into these sort of three main sections. So body lessons first focus on evoking and labeling concrete signals in each body part, such as messy hands, fast heart, too loud ears, etc. The second emotion section considers both those affective and homeostatic emotions, and it guides students through connecting body signals to a variety of emotions. So an example is when you feel frustrated, you might notice that your muscles are tight and your heart is racing and your skin feels hot. The third section, which is action, seeks to help students answer the question, what action do I need to either keep the comfort or restore the comfort in my body? And this process can help individuals who often have a large toolbox of coping skills, but they still require full support from an adult to use them during times of crisis, because it's going to help them connect more authentically to their emotions and motivate that purposeful self-regulation behavior. Um, so I know a second ago I asked everybody to sort of tell me how they know when they're hungry, right? So that's like stomach hurt. Someone else said head hurts. Someone else said no energy. Maybe your brain feels tired. Like that would be a good sort of like three body sensation check-in to know that the emotion is hunger, right? And then the action that you would take is eat something, right? Um, I'm going to give you another example for me because this is my favorite one to talk about right now. My hands are warm and I'm feeling like my feet are pretty fidgety, and my mouth is dry. I keep pausing to take a sip of coffee, and my brain feels really, really fast. And that's because even though I love being here and presenting to you guys, my body is telling my brain that I'm a little bit nervous, right? Um, so I think that it's just a really cool way to help uh, structure lessons on this idea of interoceptive awareness. And I think even informally, like we can be doing this all of the time. We can not dismiss when a student is indicating a bodily need. We can talk about different signals that our body may give us to let us know when we're thirsty or hungry or need to use the bathroom. And then also things like incorporating yoga, talking about deep breathing, talking about how your heart is feeling, if your heart is beating fast or slow, just to like practice those mindfulness skills even informally. Um, but like I said, I'm going to go over a few different case studies that use this curriculum sort of as their base, but all the materials and strategies were modified in order to make them work for our specific students. So in our first case example, this student was, or is, I guess he still is, an AAC user who was demonstrating a lot of challenges with expressing how he was feeling that could occasionally, unfortunately, result in some aggressive behaviors. We ended up collaborating with his speech language pathologist to choose some target emotions that he like maybe appears to feel most often, and we got some parent input and some teacher input. Things like hungry, thirsty, sick, tired, bored, angry, scared, sad, excited, and happy. And so we sort of backwards chained almost the curriculum with him. So we took those chosen emotion words and then we identified common body signals that accompany those emotions. And then we chose sort of targeted body area experiments to teach him what all of those things meant. We also enlarged the visuals. So the picture on the screen is the pre-reader icons that come with the curriculum. And we actually just made them like bigger so that they matched the size of the grid on his AAC device. And it involved a lot of collaboration with the classroom. So we helped create sort of like quick flip visuals to use during natural times. So not only were we practicing teaching this language during OT sessions and speech sessions, but the classroom also had little key rings so that every time, for example, they went to the bathroom and they washed hands, they practiced messy, clean, wet, dry, um, warm, cold with the water, all those kinds of words. So I think like modeling during the natural occurrences of those sensations was also really important for him. We did see a big increase in his interest in exploring his emotions and body parts pages. And then I think like we paired this with sort of that maybe more traditional expressive and receptive ID of emotion icons. And I think he made a ton of progress with being able to use language like upset, frustrated, even like hurt or pain in a way more clear way that helped us be able to meet his needs much better. Next, I have another example of a different student who had a history of these like big, explosive, angry outbursts that sort of seemed to come out of nowhere. There was no ramping up to it. It was just like 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. His team had tried so many different emotional regulation strategies in the past, and he could engage in those things in hypotheticals. He could tell you when he was calm what he needed to do, but in those moments, he could not initiate or engage with any kind of coping strategy. I think this student was also often using different special interests to describe how he was feeling, like making analogies to characters in video games or shows. So he wasn't really like showing us that he was connecting with those traditional emotion words. Um, and I think that it was our job to come up with a different way for him to tell us what his body was feeling because nothing we had tried previously was working. We did start with the student going through the entire body section. So we started with hands and feet, and you do lots of different experiments to make sure that they understand those different sensation words. Um, and this is just a little graphic of the body check ring, which is like a smaller version. So the student could read, but the icons also, I know they're a little small on the screen. I'm sorry. There's some bigger ones next. They also sort of like the picture sort of depicts the sensation a little bit. So you can see here, like the brain has some lines around it to indicate fast. The voice, which is the little speech bubble thing, has like an X through it to talk about quiet. And the tongue in this picture sort of looks a little dry, right? So we wanted to give him some um, a clear way to communicate, sort of like connecting the body signals to the emotion, because he could go through the flip book and tell us how all the different parts of his body were feeling. But we wanted to, again, make sure that we were being purposeful with our time with him. And so we sort of chose to focus on a handful of specific emotions that like we needed him to be able to explain to us. So things like anxious, angry, worried, calm, and happy. So one way that we practiced this with the student was we did little guessing games. In this example, I chose brain fast, voice quiet, mouth dry, and then he thought that I was saying that I was feeling anxious, which was correct. So then he would give me 3 body sensations, and then I would guess what kind of emotion he was trying to describe to me. We also, within this, like I said, we honored all descriptors of emotions. So one example in the guessing game he liked to play was he said, when I'm this emotion, I'm like Thomas on the branch line. And to that, I had to say, I don't know why Thomas would be on the branch line. And so then he explained that that was his favorite line of all the train tracks. And so that to me said, oh, like maybe you like that. Maybe you're trying to tell me that you're feeling happy. So just sort of honoring those individual preferences for communication. And then we're working on, like, in that moment, there was clearly a disconnect because I didn't understand the reference that he was making. So we're also working towards, building him a personalized guide to his emotions so that he could communicate in the way that he prefers, but that other adults around him can have that information so that they understand him. And then I also think important to note here, specifically with like anxious versus worried, like I do think that those are really similar emotions. And so we had sort of talked with him about the nuances of those feelings and how each emotion might feel different to different people, and that's okay. Um, and then, oh, here's just the other example. So this was one where he picked the body signals and then I guessed what he was trying to tell me. So he indicated that when his hands are tight and his voice is fast and his cheeks feel warm, that's him noticing that he's angry. Yeah. All right. And then finally, this is sort of like the third step or the action step, and this is where you can see it like all put together. So we recreated this template where there's a spot to put the body signals, a spot to indicate the emotion, and then a spot to talk about what kind of action that you can take. First, we talked about those like concrete or solvable discomfort things. Things like if your bladder is full, that means you need to use the bathroom, so you can ask me to go use the bathroom. That's like a really clear, concrete example. Or things like my skin feels itchy. I am feeling like my hands are dry, I need to use lotion, right? And then we sort of moved on to maybe these less concrete examples, specifically for this student. Their ears felt like too much and their hands felt tight, and that told them that they were feeling angry. Then they identified a cause, which was that the classroom was loud. And so the action was that he could raise his hand and ask his teacher to turn off the video. And then in a different scenario, that orange one, want to kick, is like your feet want to kick something and your brain feels distracted. And he identified that he was feeling anxious because the printer was broken, and he chose to, we couldn't change that, the printer was broken. So his action that he picked was a good coping strategy for him of going into a break space and listening to some music. And then finally, my third case example using this curriculum for students was actually a group. So we did a small group with, I think it was like maybe 5 students. Some were AAC users, some were verbal communicators, but we, had gotten some information from both parents and the teacher that they felt like their students were not aware of their hunger cues, or their stomach specifically. We had some students in this room who would occasionally throw up or appear sick. And also like felt like they wanted to eat all day long. And so we just wanted to bring some more awareness and give them some language to be able to talk about their stomach and how it was feeling, to hopefully sort of like bring more awareness and attention to those signals. So we introduced these body part images, and I did, in all of these examples, we always collaborate with our speech language pathologist to sort of talk about the level of understanding or visual representation that our students understand, and how we can make sure that this gets integrated with their AAC or communication device or style, however that student best communicates. We also used simple songs and videos to sort of enhance comprehension. Um, I wasn't sure if students even knew what their stomach was or where it was. So I included this little symbol sticks guy with an arrow pointing to the part of the body, as well as some like super simple songs videos that talked about like what happens in your stomach and where is it. We also timed this group really specifically, to happen before, during, or after lunch or a snack. We wanted to make sure that our students were likely to feel an authentic connection to the sensation. So if I was trying to talk to them about the difference between empty and full, and they had just eaten and then they weren't going to eat anything for a while, I think that might be a little bit more challenging. So it was important to me that we sort of started this group right before they ate, and then they had a snack, and then we could talk about the difference afterwards. We also, again, like with my first example, we collaborated with the parents and school staff to talk about this language into daily routines. So again, like I said, those natural times before and after meals, while you're swinging at the playground, maybe during play when you're tickling the student, drinking big sips of water, or watching a suspenseful video, right? Those are things that all like make your stomach feel different. We also sent home a handout to encourage carryover with families, and then we provided like quick flip key rings of all of these visuals for the classroom staff. And then you can see here just a couple more examples where I did sort of make a social story-esque slide to talk to them about how their body is full of clues, and it's going to tell them what they might need to be comfortable. It can also tell them how they feel. And then we did a few different of the body sensation experiments. One of those was laying on a yoga ball, sort of putting pressure on your stomach and rolling 10 times. Different examples were taking sips of carbonated water, or curling into a ball while lying on your back and like squeezing your legs in. So those were all different little experiments that we did during this group. And then that way that team and those students have sort of a point of reference to then keep talking about the body sensations. And the more practice and the more exposure you give, the more likely you are to sort of like help the student authentically understand what you want them to understand. Okay. Next is the other approach that I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So Autism Level Up is a autistic holistic partnership, which was founded by Amy Laurent and Jack Feedy, which is focused on leveling up society's engagement with autistic individuals through providing resources and supports that promote awareness, acceptance, appreciation, empowerment, and advocacy. Their energy meter framework, which coincidentally they have published into a full-blown manual that is fantastic. It's full of resources and tools that are not just the energy meter, it's tons of different strategies. Although everything is still mostly available for free on their website, which is linked in the presentation that you guys will get when we're finished here. It's designed to help students reflect on their own arousal states in relation to the environment. So this is like their very original, most basic meter that you're seeing on the screen, and it uses those two different descriptor types for what it feels like and what it looks like. And that can help individuals identify their own internal energy and then also the energy expectations for the activity. So specifically, this support is free of emotion labels, and it's particularly helpful for students who struggle with emotion identification and expression, but still are working to understand the concept of regulation and how to adjust their energy level to successfully engage in activities. It's meant to be used interactively with a co-regulation partner so that any mismatch of energy can be identified, which signals the need for a regulation strategy. Personalization using characters or topics of interest, which you'll see on the next few slides, is an important component of the strategy, along with collaboration with the individual. So I have one more little interactive portion here. So what energy level, based on this meter that I have on the screen, do you think that you need to best attend to this presentation today? Anybody? You can type it if you don't want to say it. Anybody? No. I might, if it was me, maybe need to be focused, yep, and purposeful, right, in order to be able to understand and make sure that I'm attending, right? What kind of energy do you think you would need to run a 5K or attend a concert by your favorite artist? Any Taylor Swift fans, right? Oh, right. If I was going to go to a concert, I might need amped up and fidgety. I might need more energy than I was here, right? Then finally, what about if you were trying to put your toddler to bed? What kind of energy do you think that you might need? Maybe not them, because you can't control where their energy is, right? Right. So in order to try to put your toddler to bed, you would probably need to be settled and calm. And what do you think would happen if you were not settled and calm? Probably wouldn't go so well, right? Like, I don't know that you could successfully put a toddler to bed if you were amped up and fidgety, right? So that's just an example of how you can sort of, all of these energy levels are appropriate or needed. They're all just very context and environment dependent, right? Okay, thank you all for your participation. So my first case example, using the energy meter, this student helped us create this. She had a lot of say in what it looked like, what the colors were. She chose these characters that had meaning to her. So she was very into Sailor Moon at the time, and she sort of picked which character went with which emotion, and she gave us this language. So she was fairly quiet and shy and often had a hard time like explaining her feelings or her needs to others. And during challenging situations, she had that sort of flight or fawn response where she would retreat and present it as like really low energy and would just like sort of shut down. And so she needed assistance and encouragement to participate or engage when in a low energy state. often to increase her energy, which is maybe like not the norm. That's not what we're usually asking students to do. So I always like to include her example when I talk about this. So her sensory profile indicated to us that she most often used passive strategies to manage the input in her environment. And this was the way that we got her to more actively engage in her own regulation. So you can see here, she depicted that Sailor Mars was a fire type. So that was when she was more fidgety. And then Sailor Moon was maybe when she was feeling very still and wanted to just watch others. Um, and then she helped us sort of make her energy toolbox, which is the right side of the slide. So when she was talking about when she's Sailor Jupiter, she can use an activity from her board or take a break to power down her energy. And then if her energy is at Sailor Moon, she can choose an activity from her toolbox in order to power up her energy. And so the important thing here is that we're helping students to sort of identify what energy is needed for the activity, like we just talked about, and then identifying any mismatch. So it's not saying your energy needs to be this, it's saying right now, this is the activity that needs this energy, so let's help you get there. There's not like one right answer all the time, right? Um, and I think that this energy meter helped her better regulate her energy throughout her day. We first like taught her how to use this tool, and then her classroom started to use it like throughout her day. And this is something that she successfully accesses whenever she needs it now. Next, there we go. So this student had a history of describing emotions using really non-traditional language. Whenever he was upset, he would talk about a breaking feeling or spinny or twisting. Like it was never happy, sad, mad, right? He never naturally used that language, even though he could identify them receptively and expressively. He often also used terms like my elevator is broken or that wind turbine needs fixed. And those were special interests of his. And he was sort of connecting how he was feeling to those special interests. So we wanted to create him a tool that would help him describe how he was feeling without using those emotion words that it was pretty clear that like he was not connecting with. One of his other special interests is also ocean animals. So we made sort of two different versions of an energy meter here. And one that has like more of a social focus and one that has more of like an energy focus. He helped us choose the language and the references on both of these, as well as the pictures that are on here. And then as he has sort of become more familiar with this tool, we have started using it at the beginning of each session to identify any energy mismatches. Like he has sort of a history of also being a little bit low arousal, that like even when the activity is something that he really likes to do, oftentimes he indicates that he's not ready, or he doesn't want to like get up and leave his classroom. So this sort of helped us be able to identify any sort of mismatches. So we use little clothespins on each side. So these are like full page laminates, and then we'll clothespin the energy needed for whatever the activity is, and then he can identify where his energy is, and it's very clear when they're not lined up, when it's time to use a tool, which is on this page. So this is sort of a few different screenshots of this student's energy toolbox. And so we used also an autism level up tool called the regulator to help him trial a variety of energy modulation tools. And this is a really great resource that is also available on their website, but also part of the manual. And it lists out a lot of different activities and different sensory categories. There's also space to write in whatever you like. And it prompts you to talk about whether you like it or not, and then it prompts you to talk about how it affects your energy. And we trialed lots of different tools that were both from this sort of novel list, as well as things that the student has liked or used in the past. And he sort of helped me sort them into these categories of whether they make his energy feel higher or lower. We also added a just right page. That helped him also sort of choose those tools to maintain his energy, because I think that we don't ever want to give the impression that when your energy is correct, then you don't have to do anything extra. And so we wanted to make sure that we were sort of reinforcing that, like, great, your energy matches, but we'd like you to maintain that. So we're going to pick a just right tool. And so this was something that I personally taught him to use. And now he can identify when there's a mismatch and then choose the correct page of tool that he'll need for that specific moment. And then sometimes needs a little bit of help sort of parsing out which activity he feels like doing in the moment, but can pretty much independently do this part of the process. And then I have one more slide about this same student. So this is like the final sort of step. And I think that this really was a tool to help the other adults in his life, because he, much like we see a lot of times in related services, was doing a really great job of doing this in OT and during our sessions, or if I was spending time in the classroom. But when it came to engaging in this with other adults, I think it was a little bit more challenging for them. And so this was a tool that he and I created together to better help him communicate and to better help them understand. So it splits up each of the energy levels into what others see, hear, and observe. And so I filled this portion out, and then he told me what he feels or experiences at each level. And then finally, we talked together about when or where is each energy level the best fit. And I think that that's so important when using any tool, but also this tool specifically. Is that every energy level has its place, and every energy level has an appropriate context and activity. And sort of laying it out like this, I think, can be really helpful, not only for the student, but for all of the adults, to remind them that there's no one right answer to any of these things. And we have to sort of respect the difference between needed energy. And we don't want to constantly be telling students that there's like a right answer, or that there's one space where they should always be, right? Because we experience a wide range of emotions, and our students are entitled to that too. Okay. All right, and I have one last case example, and then I promise we'll have a few minutes for questions. So in this last example, we tried a lot of different things with this student. You can see a couple different versions maybe of a very simplified energy meter here. In working with his speech language pathologist and the classroom, we wanted to make sure that he really understood what we were trying to explain to him. We tried, the student really likes bugs, so we did try one with different kinds of bugs, and I think he just wanted to talk about the bugs, which was really great. But I don't think that he was really connecting to those. Then we tried some like sort of cartoon or like stock images of different individuals. And finally, we landed on just like real pictures of him, right? So we got different pictures of him at sort of a low, a medium, and a high energy level. You can see him really high on the swing there in the gym. And he was often like fluctuating a lot between appearing very tired and lethargic and sleeping a lot, and then like huge bursts of energy and moving and talking so fast that no one could understand him. So this was sort of a work in progress. Like I said, I think at one point we even used videos for each energy level, so that it was even more of a visual support for him. Instead of like a static picture, we showed him a short video clip of himself at each energy level, to really hone in on that understanding of what each of those things meant and looked like for him. And then we sort of helped him create these more simplified toolbox of tools, and he can use and engage with these different toolboxes after an adult has helped him sort of identify his energy level. And I have one final note for you guys. We talked a lot about coping strategies. I showed you some different toolboxes and different supports that we've used for our students. And I don't know if you noticed that there's some really interesting things on there. Things like smelling vinegar or watching an elevator video, right? So I think that if you guys take nothing else out of this, is that coping tools or regulation strategies are so personalized. And I think that it's really important that we listen to our students when they're trying to show us or tell us what things make their bodies feel good. I have one student in particular who hates calming music. Like you would think like, oh, listen to calming music. Like, let me play you some instrumental. No, the thing that makes this student feel more regulated is like angry, screaming, loud music. And that's for him and that's not for me, and that's great, but it's not my place to sort of try to force him to be calm while listening to calm music. If he's telling me that that kind of music, and he's showing me with his actions and his body that that kind of music makes him feel more calm, then I have to honor that. So I would just think about things like screen time, drawing or coloring, talking about their special interest, incorporating all of those sensory preferences as coping tools, because if the kids like the thing, you're gonna get more buy-in. And I think that that is the most important part. All right, that was my last slide. So I don't know if you guys have any like specific questions or anything else you wanted to ask me. I know there were some questions about the handouts, so we're definitely going to send those out after this along with the recording so that you guys can watch it back and take any notes. Okay, hold on. A question about how long do you recommend a coping strategy be used for how many minutes? I mean, that's sort of really student dependent. I don't think there's one right answer for that, and I'm sorry. But I think that the biggest thing for me is that it's our job to be really thoughtful clinical observers and sort of help the student make that determination. So if we're watching them and we can sort of see that their demeanor is changing, or maybe we'll put the activity that we wanted them to engage in sort of close to them and they're looking more interested in it. Like I think it's okay to sort of take some anecdotal information and then help the student or help define how long that might be for that student in each situation. But I would also say that like every day is different. And so I think that it's kind of challenging to say like it's only for 5 minutes every time, because maybe there's lots of other things going on that day and you could use a little bit more time with that tool. So I think in those situations, I would recommend you just like do some really careful observation and sort of choose the amount of time that's best for your individual. Okay, someone else said focus on the energy instead of their actual feelings. I mean, I think that for some students, that's what they need, because I think that we often, at least in my practice, I've seen people get stuck, right? Where we're trying to teach them emotion faces and emotion words, and maybe their receptive and expressive language is sort of not there yet. But they're still dysregulated. They're still having challenges with managing their emotions and their behaviors. And so if the emotion words or the feeling words are sort of like what's stopping us from helping them or what's stopping them from communicating with us what their body needs, then I think that it would be appropriate to try to use a different tool like an energy meter that sort of takes that barrier away. So you don't have to know what happy or sad or mad are or what those words mean in order to recognize that when you're running around the gym, your energy is high, and when you're laying on a beanbag, your energy is low, right? So I think it's just one more way to sort of like use their strengths and not sort of like hold back on practicing regulation or teaching regulation until they can learn those words, because it's not 100% necessary all the time. Okay. I'm going to read this long question. For SLPs, is it appropriate to focus on these strategies in sessions if it contributes to the learner's goals, or would it be better for the SLP partner to partner with OT like you did in some of the examples? I mean, I think that it's sort of a little bit of both. Like, I'm not saying like SLPs should still be working on things like this because it is part of their scope of practice and it is a thing that they're commonly working on with students. But I mean, specifically at Monarch School, we're collaborating all of the time. And so I am like fully on that hill of collaboration is integral for all students. So I don't think that it would hurt to just touch base with your students' OT if they have one, or touch base with their classroom teacher. To sort of make sure that what we're teaching them is comprehensive. And I think that it has helped us connect with our students more authentically when I know what speech is doing and speech knows what OT is doing, so that we can sort of incorporate language and strategies from both fields into those sessions. And I think that it's made our students have bigger gains in this area. Oh, and then a question about the energy meters. So it's from Autism Level Up. And when we send out the slides in my references, there is a link. But if you just look up like Autism Level Up in Google, you'll find their website, and they have a ton of different free resources and examples. A lot of the examples that I showed in this presentation, we made ourselves, but we modeled off of theirs, but they also allow you to just download and print their resources. So you can just use those and then see what your student likes. Okay, I think we also only have 1 minute left, so I'm not sure if it's going to kick us off at 10:30 exactly, but okay. All right, any other questions? It will not kick us off. I've confirmed that. And also, I think when we send out the slides, I can also include my contact information. So if you guys, think of another question or you want access to something else, you can always email me and I can send out whatever. Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much. Also, really sorry about the technical difficulties, but we made it. Um, Thank you, and I hope you guys have a really good Friday.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.